Hi, Marilyn. Marilyn, can you see? Hi.
Yes, hi.
Okay. And can you hear me?
There's quite a delay on my end. I don't know why that is.
I don't know. You are a little bit blurry. I thought you'd come across the street.
Nope. I think it's going to be a little bit too treacherous tonight.
Well, that's only about 300 feet from your front door.
Except I'm not there.
Well, I may be the only one here. I don't know.
I think that's the way it's looking like based on the email chatter that went back and forth.
Let me see where they go.
Hey, John, did you send out a set of meeting minutes from last month?
Yes, I did.
Okay. I couldn't find them on the shared drive. That's why I'm asking.
Okay. I don't know whether they got put on there or not. I think I did. I sent it out. I did them a long time ago, so.
Yeah, I'm sure you sent them.
I figured of all people, you would be here.
I can tell you, based on what I'm seeing through this Zoom portal, the video is very slow on my end. I can see you in real time,
Yeah.
but the video on my end is not good.
Who do you have for a provider?
Spectrum.
Huh, that should be okay. Because.
Yes, it normally is.
What I may do is just move this whole table right up. Nobody's coming. And I'll just do it standing up. Probably everybody's going to sign in at 7 o'clock. Oh, here we go. No one's here? Hi. It looks like there's going to be very few of us in person. I see over here.
Okay.
Because I don't think there's going to be more than 3 or 4 anyway.
Okay.
Let's see if I can make sure we're getting this. Hi, John. Can you hear us all right, John?
Yes, I can hear you quite well.
Very good.
I, for some reason, didn't get all the emails today, so I just thought everybody was taking them.
That's you.
It's only went on 64 tonight.
What?
It's only went on 64 tonight.
I can't believe how warm the warm pool is. I didn't think it'd be that warm.
I know, 85. I don't remember being that.
The last time I went in the cold pool only, it was cold.
Yeah.
It's like regular temperature. It's more like our pool. It wasn't. Well, that's what it's cold.
They probably have to hold cooler pools in the winter.
I think we're just waiting for one more person. Oh, Carrie's here. Okay. Okay. I don't think Karen is going to be chiming in. And and she's asked that I begin the meeting. The first thing on the agenda is minutes. Did everybody get a copy of the minutes?
Yeah.
Any additions or corrections or modifications? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
John Hearn, second.
Matthew Erkeline, I'll second.
Okay, the Matt seconded. All in favor? Just wave your hand or whatever. Okay. Yes. All right, tonight we're talking about the built environment. I just want to go over the items that are on the list of things for today and the meeting later on this month that we have in our itinerary. We're to review existing styles and time periods they represent, explore how buildings relate to the decisions to live in the village, visit the village, invest in the business, the je ne sais quoi de Boston Spa, whether it has what the results of it lax zoning enforcement perhaps, how do we define it, maintaining village character, central business district building heights, design standards, tear downs, new structures, compatibility with existing structures, creation of a clean energy, and then methods of implementation, which would be the next meeting's focus, I think. And John Hearn and I got together to try to put together a framework for today's meeting. Did you all receive that? You did, okay. Now, are there any other topics that you think we should be talking about that John and I may have missed? Anybody think of any general topics? Okay, and shall I start going down to what we put together?
Yes.
You have a copy of this too?
Yeah.
Good. Basically, read it over for those who may not have, or are not on the committee. Buildings are the primary components of streetscapes. People make judgments based upon what they see. What do people see when they enter and go through or around Boston Spa? That was our first question. And we tried to define the built environment just by what people would see. Almost no two buildings are similar to each other, except in several developments. If they were once, they're not now because they've probably been treated differently over the years. Architecture includes those buildings from the late 1700s almost to present. Varied housing styles have grown into each other over time. Little in the village is jarringly different. Maybe different, but we're not so different as to create a negative reaction. There are significant exceptions. Buildings are generally maintained but not picture perfect. Except for churches and factories, there are no real tall buildings. In the older sections of the village, streets have buildings with very different uses. It defies Euclidean zoning. And for those of you who may not know the term Euclidean zoning, it comes out of a Supreme Court case in the 1920s with the city of Euclid. It has nothing to do with the mathematician. And that Supreme Court case said it was all right for municipalities to define particular zones for particular uses. But rather, our older sections reflect the way the village has evolved over time. Storefronts in the downtown are full. There is activity downtown. And then we've asked you to come up with additional observations about our built environment in a general sense.
John, I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure what the proper terminology is, but does Boston Spa have a code where if a new building was going up, it had to adhere to certain aesthetic standards?
No, only in the historic district area.
Only in the historic district?
John, I have a question.
Yes,
Point number 4, you say, except for churches and factories, there are no tall buildings, yet there are tall buildings in the village. The county complex is one very tall building. There are tall buildings in the central business district. Village Hall is a tall building. How are you defining a tall building?
let's just say, taller than the village hall, taller than, the 3 stories above the street level.
Okay, so I would like to see us kind of modify that statement there, because there are tall buildings in the village that are more than just churches and factories.
You know, I would agree that it depends on how you look at tall. I think, John, you can correct me, but I think we're looking at, 5, 6 story type high buildings.
Yes, yeah, that's what you and I were referring to when you and I were discussing it.
But are there any other observations you could add to this list? Jackie, anything?
I more have a question.
Yes.
Certain buildings like, town hall, do they have to is that included in the historic district? Do they have to maintain
No.
a certain look?
No, good question. The historic district deals with only those properties that face West High Street, up to the little creek that you don't even see when you're starting to go up the hill. East High Street to Eastern Avenue, Beach Street, Pleasant Street from beach to front, and the east side of Milton Avenue from Pleasant Street up to East High Street. That's it. The historic district does not include anything else.
Okay. I noticed that on Front Street at least, there's a lot of more modern restaurants
Mhm.
on the base, and then the rest of the building looks completely different from, like, for instance, like on Next Door Kitchen and Henry's, or Next Door Kitchen doesn't have anything above it, but Henry's has other stories above it, and it looks completely different than the facade of, it's almost a juxtaposition of a very modern restaurant with a more, not outdated, but more traditional features above, which looks odd.
Do we want to consider specific aesthetic standards, or, well, not specific, but broad standards? But it sounds like we don't have any standards to begin with in the business.
I think that's something that we can be thinking about and talking about, and should come to some head at the next meeting.
Well, that's what we were talking about when we're saying that a lot of it's been updated, and a lot of the facades have been changed to not fit to the original zoning, or sorry, the original appearance of the architecture. And that's the perfect example, yeah, where they came in, fancied up some of the restaurants and changed the storefronts that they no longer carry the original design and architecture.
Okay, anything else about what you actually see when you're walking through? Okay, the next area.
Yeah, John,
Yes,
this is Marilyn. I'd just like to give you my perspective, because I did take a lot of time to think about this. And the thing that I noticed is that, the community is primarily residential. And from my perspective, I actually call it in harmony with its environment. when you drive the route from the south to the north, it's amazing the amount of green space that you're seeing as you drive along Route 50 going north through that residential area and then adjacent to the central business district. In addition to the, the green spaces that we have. So that's what I'd like to contribute to this. There's quite a bit that green space does to actually cover some of the utility lines and the other things that you see in that streetscape. And I'm sure during the growing season, a lot of those deciduous trees are also covering the facades of a lot of those homes. And also that's true a little bit towards the north end of the village, where there's still significant intact, wooded areas and wetlands adjacent to some of the businesses on the north end of the village.
You bring up a very good point. The one thing that we did not discuss is the negative of the built environment, which is the green environment and what's not built up. And I think you're right, that's got to be looked at as well.
I only say that because recently I had to go down to Guilderland and drive through Route 20. And I noticed that major contrast, although we're talking about a similar state highway, when I drove through that wider corridor, that was the one big thing that I noticed, the contrast between vegetative cover and green space and buffer versus what our village has, which I consider to be an asset.
Okay. Anything else on this? The next area we looked at are the places that people will usually see when they drive through Ballston Stop or maybe visit it. And we described the 4 streets that are the main drag and West High Street, and then also Front Street. One of the interesting things about the existing conditions report, and I find that we're going to run into this in the future, is when we went to see how much traffic there really was on Route 50. The existing conditions report only talked about the amount of traffic on Church Avenue. Did not talk about Milton Avenue or Doubleday Avenue. On Church Avenue, there was 15,000 trips per day. And they also mentioned on West High Street, there were 8,000 trips per day. But that's all we had. Then we described West High Street as churches, government buildings, professional offices, and large modest residences ranging in age from the 1812 John Taylor House to the 1960 branches. On Church Street, the business strip of the town of Boston ends immediately at the village sign and turns into primarily single-family homes that also vary in age and size. At the intersection of Milton Avenue are commercial businesses and large homes converted to business uses. Milton Avenue then becomes a block of significant residential structures, leads to the late 19th and early 20th century business buildings, stores below, residences on second and third floors. After it crosses the Gordon Creek, this street becomes a mix of residential structures, churches, and businesses. On Doubleday Avenue, and for those who may not be totally aware of who are listening in, of the geography of the village, Milton Avenue goes right straight up past Rollins Street. But when you turn off to go to Saratoga, it's Doubleday Avenue. It's sort of like a strip. There was a substantial amount of green space. What is built on the Ricketts lot will greatly affect the appearance of the northern entrance to the village. And then the fifth very publicly oriented street is Front Street, which begins with mainly 19th century commercial buildings from the east to its middle, then encompassing Griswold Park, followed by early 19th century residences and commercial structures. and terminating in the Iron Spring Park in Brookside. We thought that it was probably one of the more walkable streets in the village, if not the most, where most people are walking. Whether how walkable some of it is another story, I guess. Now, then we wanted you to start thinking about what are the images that this creates the people coming into the village. What do they really think about what they're seeing? That's the question of the night.
John, this is Ellen. I'm not sure if this is the place to put this. We're talking about visualization on these streets. And I know just in terms of Front Street itself, the switch over the eastern end of Front Street up to say Bath Street is very much commercial business and tends to be where the foot traffic is. What happens when you get past Bath Street and even past the Front Street branch of the Boston Spa National Bank is that it kind of loses, you have those beautiful older homes and stuff like that, but it loses its pedestrian draw, I guess is what I'm looking for. One of the things that I know we've always kind of knocked around is being able to extend that whole visualization of using all of Front Street, directing people down to the Iron Spring Park, to Brookside. So I definitely think the type of buildings and how that street is built up definitely makes a difference in how it's utilized or not fully utilized, if you know what I mean.
How does that affect the visitor?
I'm saying that, what?
The person who's shopping, coming to Boston Spa to visit, what does that person think that happens?
Well, and I think it does, for the shops that are down there, although if you talk to them, so mainly it's like Boho Chic and there's Rosie's Repeats, there's a few of them down there. I think, she's fine, but she has a following. I think it is challenging for a business to open up down there because people tend to visually look at the buildings that are there. And those, correct me if I'm wrong, but that little front of buildings, where George Farnham used to have his office and stuff, those are like some of the oldest buildings in the village, correct?
Those are across the street, that's correct. Although George Farnham's is sort of an interesting, because he completely changed over the storefront. And that's one of the few examples of postmodern architecture that Boston Spa has. So,
but yeah, I do think it affects, I think it affects somewhat negatively on again, extending for shoppers and stuff like that. I think visually for people who aren't from Boston Spa, the downtown Front Street district ends at Bath Street for them, for many people.
we need more. What else do people think when they come into town? Drive through it even. Matt, you must have some ideas.
No, I'm just taking it all in.
Huh? Don't we can't visualize what a visitor looks at?
Okay, one other thing I will mention, because it's always been a burr as far as I'm saying under the saddle, is Cumberland Farms. When people are driving through and they do get a sense of, if you're coming south, you're coming north, so Church Street to Milton Avenue to Doubleday. And you basically have, like you said, mostly the older homes on the Church Avenue. And then you start getting into the downtown business district, and most of the downtown businesses are in buildings that are late 19th, early 20th century. And then you have this Cumberland Farms right smack dab in the middle of town. It looks like it, was plopped there by aliens or something. It has nothing to do with anything else that's in the village. So it doesn't, I think it's a jarring kind of thing if you're driving through Boston Spa, I think the attractiveness of the storefronts helps. I know that people on Milton Avenue, businesses will say that sometimes people will be stopped at a light at Malta Avenue and look over and see their storefront. And that's what attracts them to come and shop. So I think there's a positive there.
Yeah. I'll build off of that, Ellen. People can be judgmental, and when they drive through town, one question that they would raise in their minds would be, how welcoming is this for me to walk the streets, to peruse the stores? And that would be one question, is how friendly or how inviting does the town appear to be,
How
based
inviting,
on just based on observation driving through.
how inviting do you think it is, Matt?
I like the downtown area. I would say, as it starts leveling off, I think it's the Elks Club. From there, all the way down to the light where the gas station is, the Exxon or whatever they're calling themselves these days, and the Napa Auto Store. Right through there, you see a lot of older buildings that seem welcoming or inviting. You can see they have a salon or an antique shop, and they have signs, and so they cater to the foot traffic. I think that's a big welcoming thing in my mind, is if I see foot traffic, maybe there's something there to walk to, as opposed to just driving through.
Yeah, I think unfortunately Front Street is way more attractive than 50, but people aren't driving through Front Street. So they're
It's true.
that they're passing the library and going north, and they're really not realizing, potentially they're not seeing a really cute neighborhood. They're just seeing the gas stations and Aldi's, and they're not realizing all the small shops and restaurants that are kind of on off streets.
Yeah, we have to get them to get off of 50 to actually do the walk, like you're saying, on Front Street. It's way more inviting on Front Street. That's right.
Well, the one thing that I would say about this that I think is causing a perception problem for me, one of the images that I have is always that sense of congestion, vehicle congestion on Front Street due to the angled parking spaces that are across the street from the post office and in front of the pharmacy. That always seems to be an issue when I drive through that area, which I do occasionally. But I think just the reputation that Ballston Spa has itself, due to the history of the First Fridays and the new and unique shops and the other activities that have happened over the last 30 years, it's always been something that will attract someone when they're on foot, but it is, the congestion on Front Street is a detractor when you are driving. And certainly trying to look for that elusive parking space, is problematic sometimes. You almost have to time it right to be able to get a space to do some business downtown.
See, I tend to take an opposite view. I like congestion, because I think congestion means it's vital, it's active, there's noise, there's motion, and there's nothing like having a lot of people confirming that you're in the right place. So I look upon congestion as a positive thing, whereas I can see someone in the car just get frustrated because they can't get to where they want to be quite as soon as they wish. But I've always looked upon congestion as positive.
Well, my point would be, if there are no available parking spaces, then that's a lost sale for a business owner or from a restaurateur, or even for someone who, just wants to purchase something small. It's problematic.
That's true about parking. Anything
And
else?
the last thing that I'll say, just in terms of images created by the above scenario, John, that you've developed here, the unique thing about the village and Ballston Spa and the businesses are that they are primarily small businesses.
Right.
We have very few national chains in the village, and that's a rare thing. Except for gas stations, Dunkin' Donuts and Napa. Again, these are services we all need. And sure, we'd love to have had that gas station look a little bit more appropriate for the village when it was done more than 30 years ago. But we really don't have that overbearing influx of national chains in the village. And as a result, that je ne sais quoi that you speak about is still intact in Ballston Spa, 35 years later.
Okay, it's about 25 after. And I want to go to the next item, which is how does the built environment affect decisions to invest in the village? And one of the thoughts we had was that it discourages those investors who look at exterior details as added expense and would really want to put their money into something that's closer to a vanilla box. But it also attracts those who are willing to bet that the village properties will appreciate faster than other real estate investments, looking for the long term. And I want to add something. I contacted Ron Murphy of High Rock, and I asked him what brought him to Ballston Spa. And he sent me this email back. What brought me to the village was the untapped potential. I saw a quaint little town close to Saratoga in the Northway that I felt could go nowhere but up. The character of the old buildings and hometown feel intrigued me. What has kept me here over the years is the willingness of the village to work with me to get my projects done without a ton of politics. I tend to get very frustrated with politics and red tape of development projects. That seems to be changing in the last couple of months, but we will see how it goes. I hope this helps, Ron. But he's talking about our built environment and how that affected it to invest it. Now, with that, open it up to everybody's questions or comments, I should say. Here, you've got to help us out. You've been very quiet.
Been putting the girls down, so I'm sorry. I've just kind of really joined a little late.
Oh, all right. Hi, Jed.
And I just kind of came in here really at the end of what Marilyn was saying there. But I suppose in looking at really the impact of the built environment, John, I think what you outlined in your document here of what's discouraging and what's encouraging is really pretty good at a broad level. But I think at the same time, there's an appetite for folks who are encouraged, not just by the bet on the village as a long-term profit investment, but potentially as the community that it holds within it. What I heard there from Ron at that you just read, it wasn't just opportunity for development from the sound of it, right? It's the community and what the community has, which the built environment should encourage. And I think continues to encourage. Speaking as somebody who grew up here and chose to move back here, a big reason was the built environment of the village.
I'm going to get something on the computer. I don't think I can see everybody who's in. I can't see everybody anyway. Okay. I'll need one of your expertise. I don't have the expertise of you folks on the who are at home to make so I can see all the pictures of everybody who's here. So Sorry about that. If I'm not asking you a question, it's because I don't see your screen up on the top. Okay, John. Okay, Jared. But if the built environment brought you back to Boston Spa, this is another question later on that we were talking about. What is it about the built environment?
I mean, I think that's a good question, John, but you know, there's a certain indescribable element to it, but at the same time, there's a history that's apparent. And, you know, I had some time and I looked through what you had shared, John, of your kind of architectural survey from, you know, a decade or so ago. And I think, again, you're hitting on some things there that are pretty thematic for the way a lot of folks, at least in my experience, think about where they want to settle. And that's where you feel comfortable. What sort of environment do you want to be in? Do you want to be able to walk? Do you want tall buildings around you? Do you want to be surrounded by children, you know, schools and parks and playgrounds? And there are aspects of that here in the village throughout, you know, kind of scattered through a lot of the neighborhoods. Being familiar with it certainly helped in bringing me back. But my wife is from Atlanta. She had never really seen a village like this before. You know, in Atlanta, everything's newly built. Really can't date back any further than the mid 1800s for some specific reasons. But this was her first visit here. In hindsight, as we talked about wanting to move back here later on, she said to me that she knew she wanted to move back here without even a conversation about it. She was kind of the driving force behind it ultimately. And I think that's that appeal that you get, as we've talked about, and as you noted, kind of driving north along Church as it turns into Milton Ave, you get this beautiful view of the village there. And that's the first view a lot of people have of it. That's appealing. And I don't know that we need to think of it as a discouraging thing, that there's potential expense needed for the external aesthetics of parts of the village.
It's good enough by itself, is what you're saying. It doesn't need to be
exactly. I mean, I think it's, the charm is there, right? And that's what I think we're all talking about in the je ne sais quoi, or and however we want to describe it. The charm is there. It's just a matter of helping it realize itself fully, from each of the different directions you might enter the village. Just bringing that all full circle, so that if you're driving, you know, north to south, you come past Ricketts, there's something there that's appealing to you, rather than, you know, a large chain link fence kind of scaring people away. Nobody, if this is my first time through the village, that's not a place where I want to stop.
Okay, what else people can think about we have that will encourage people to invest in the village? Or do you think Ron Murphy said it all?
What do we have? We have location. It's right down the road between the Capital District and Saratoga.
Absolutely. Location, location, location.
And we get that traffic. Route 50 is, I mean, that's just we just need to stick the net out. I mean, you catch folks instead of going to Saratoga, bring them to Boston Spa. And it's slowly happening too. The trickle down from Saratoga is certainly visible in the last 10 years. It's marked increase, I should say.
I think one of the reasons is that Saratoga has chosen the route of big commercial development, tall buildings, really has that, they've put their eggs in that basket. That's where they're going now with the tall buildings. And for some people, that's great, you know, and that might work for some people. And that's, you know, the chain stores are there, you know, so what was Saratoga maybe 30, 40 years ago is what Boston Spa is now. And for people who prefer that as their downtown, we get the benefit of that now. And we, and that is, it's a cautionary tale. Not that I could ever see the Boston Spa would ever do anything that Saratoga's doing. Obviously, we just don't have it's just not the thing. It's not a city, it's a village, obviously. But I think we get the advantage of, being a real contrast. And so we definitely can coexist side by side with that development by, just nurturing and enhancing what we already have here. And I think that's what Ron Murphy does. And, all credit to him and people like him and the Elliots and Spencer Tacey. These are all people who have invested in the infrastructure already, or in the built environment already established here in the village.
I showed Ron's note to Spencer, and he said absolutely, he agreed with it 100%. Okay. The next question is, how does the built environment affect decisions to establish a retail business in Boston Spa? And I think for this, we are generally going to be thinking about the CBD, where I ask people not to limit your thoughts to just the CBD, but to think about the areas around it as well. That is not yet considered a place to put a retail business, but the potential is there. So how does our built environment affect decisions about setting up a retail business here?
I think it's for all the reasons that Ellen just succinctly said. There's opportunities for very specialty small businesses, which, in Saratoga, that's a risk. There's it's almost all small businesses, and they're very specific. And I think that's a rare thing, especially when there is so much walkability and foot traffic.
I think what also plays into that is, yes, we have location, but it comes back to the welcomingness. Does somebody want to set up a business based on foot traffic if the built environment is not conducive to a significant volume of foot traffic? So again, it's like a judgment call. Is it worth the aesthetic worth investing in? That could be a factor.
Mm-hmm.
John, if you're talking about non-traditional, I mean, we all tend to think of Milton Avenue, Front Street, or whatever. Some of the development down Washington Avenue, as recent as 10, 15 years ago, Washington Street was derelict until those properties were bought and renovated and continue to be renovated with the eye towards bringing that walkable business district farther to Bath Street, and then ultimately to where Angelica is now and the bowling alley is now. Those are two big properties that are those big elephants in the room, okay, that can, expand that business district and that walkability. And so by developing Washington Street to be another gateway to deeper into the business district and those properties, and with those properties in mind, what developers will be looking at, what they can put there, is they want it to be, I would imagine it's going to be something that they want to have that will be conducive to everything else that's in the downtown district. So whatever is going to be built up there and whatever the village is going to be looking at from developers, it's going to have to be something that enhances the already built environment.
I think that's correct. The Bath Street is very dependent on Washington Street, because when you look at the other streets, Hamilton or Van Buren or Ford, they're really not gonna pull people, but Washington Street will pull people to the foot of Bath Street. When you talk, no, I'm not really a retail business, but I am sort of. I provide services rather than goods. But I've been on Bath Street now for over 45 years. And, people don't come to me because they're walking down Bath Street, obviously, but there is that street can accommodate businesses. What's that?
Yeah, this may flow into the next question, but I work at Druthers, so a lot of times, especially during track season when it's busy, we sometimes have like a 3-hour wait, and people are always asking, like, we walk around Saratoga and we just kind of came here on a whim. We're coming from New York City or we're coming from Montreal. This is a halfway point. Like, where can we find food in the area that doesn't have a long wait? And I always send them to Boston Spa. Like, oh, it's right on 50. It's right off the Northway, next door kitchen, Henry's. And like, it's a great midpoint between two major cities where a lot of people go through. And then, even from word of mouth, you just start telling people. And there's people that come to Druthers multiple times a year. Every single time they're driving through, they stop at Druthers. Boston Spa can be that. The next door kitchen can be that. Henry's can be that. If people hear about a restaurant that they like, they will start stopping there, and that will be their go-to. Especially if they have a good time, if they have a good experience, they'll want to come back. It'll be a go-to for them.
So you said in the middle of two big cities, you mean Montreal and New York?
New York, even Boston and Buffalo. Like, there's a lot of people that this is like a midpoint for them when they're going on vacation.
Have you seen that in the business professional work, Ellen, going on? People looking at Boston Spa as sort of a midway stop-off point?
Oh, I think,
John? Oh, sorry. I just wanted to pose a question. How much tourism does Boston Spa want? Because when you get a lot of tourism, it has effects on the residents. So I just put that out as a potential discussion point.
We'll take it all.
I
That would be a good problem to have. If we had, so the conversation, so for example, if we did have a ton of foot traffic and a ton of downtown volume and even more congestion, that would be a good problem, and that would be a different conversation to have than we are now.
I think to John's question, I think the most foot traffic is that overflow from Saratoga, when people are like, they're just kind of fed up with the crowds and everything in Saratoga. So it's like, let's go down to Boston Spa. You can get just as good food. You can get, the service is better. It's a little bit, you're not parking out in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. I do think we might be a tad far off the Northway for people who are just meandering. They might have a tendency to go the other way and stop in Malta and eat something there, even though there's not really much there. No offense to any Malta people. But I think in terms of tourism, we definitely, as I could tell from the events that we do in the summer, we're seeing a lot more visitors to the farmers market, to the concerts, people coming obviously downtown for shopping, but even for events that aren't from Boston Spa, who come from Albany and those surrounding areas. So I think when we pull in people, non-residential people, they tend to be probably within a 25-mile radius of us, is what we're seeing a lot more. People from Gloversville, Johnstown, that kind of thing. So I mean, that's the draw for us. It's funny because I somebody from Burn Hills told me that to them, Boston Spa is their Saratoga. That's where they go. So yeah, I think as Matt says, yeah, we'll take that foot traffic. we'll take those people. If it's the dead of winter, yeah, we're not really seeing it. And it's still a functional residential village. It's still, I think it still functions very well for the residents. So,
I mean, if we have the foot traffic, then the conversation can be, how can we tailor that said foot traffic? How can we work with it? But we're not there yet for that conversation. We're still trying to get any foot traffic to increase, let alone particular type of foot traffic that we want.
Quite a few years ago, when I was talking to a fellow, going down to see Paul Schenkel, who had a gun shop where the Battle Museum is now, I came to the conclusion, he was talking about the people who were coming to his business. And he was talking about people coming from Utica. And at that point, I came to the conclusion that any store that's not a local type business, like the pizza shop or whatever, drugstore, any store that's a specialty store in Ballston Spa, in order to succeed, has to bring people from a 90-mile radius. Now, maybe the majority of the people are 25 miles away, but I think they have to have a reach that will go out to Utica, down to Hudson, up to the where there's not too much about Glens Falls, but over towards the state line in New England. I think we have to have a presence in that 90-mile radius in order to. I think any retail store that's a specialty store has to do that. That brings in their excess profit.
Well, social media has been pretty darn effective in really promoting the village of Ballston Spa. And, I think that's been the technology that Ballston Spa has been successful with over the last decade or so. When you have people coming from central New York to have New Year's Eve dinner at one of our restaurants on Front Street, that kind of says it all to me. And that's not the first time something like that, at least has been observed firsthand by me. So we've got successful businesses in the central business district, and success breeds success. That is now being communicated through social media. That brings people to the village. I've met people from the DC metro area that have come to Ballston Spa specifically because of the reputation of next door restaurant and bar. So that's out there.
And here I thought it was just our bottle museum. Our national bottle museum.
It is.
Is the farmer's market still in the park?
Farmers market will all the farmers market be back in the park next summer? Liz, the farmers market is going to be back in the park next summer.
Yes. As far as they haven't requested, but I assume they want to be.
yeah, we're getting vendors. It's February's our month to get everything, all the ducks in a row. But yes, that's what we're planning.
Okay. I know I have friends that really love the Saratoga and the Troy markets, and they always tell me if Ballston Spa was bigger, they would go there. It's such a small park. If there was a space, I can't even think of something, but if there was a bigger space on 50 that people drive by and they see it, kind of like when you're on 9 and you see that market that they set up in the state park in Saratoga, people will stop by if they see a ton of vendors. And I don't know if we're there yet, but I do know if we could expand that and have it more on a street where drivers will see it, because people on 50 are not going to see a farmer's market over in the park on Front Street. But that will draw in a lot of people. At least my friends love the market.
You're making Ellen think.
No, well, first of all, I'm retiring at the end of March, so it's not going to be my problem anymore. But our market it's because the market is one of many things that the BSBPA does. We can't basically sponsor the market, but the market is vendors. When you talk about the Troy market, the Saratoga markets, we can't compete with that because they're their own entities. They're their own organizations. In order to have a market like that, you need to have an individual, you know, like all the vendors, or that has to be its own organization. The original intent of the market when it started in 2003 in Wiswell Park was, again, what the BSBPA was trying to do was pull people downtown, because that was at the time when we were trying to get feet on the street on Front Street and Milton Avenue. And the whole point was people to park, go to the farmer's market, walk around town to the shops. Because again, our intent was to bring business to the downtown. And if that meant coming to the farmer's market and then going and having lunch, breakfast, or, you know, like what people do now on Saturday mornings, they have their breakfast at Iron Roost and they come across and they do the park, they do the farmer's market, or they do some antique shopping. So the whole point of, you know, if you moved it, you know, on Route 50, they would stop at the farmer's market and totally bypass the village.
Okay, I see.
Okay, let's bounce, we already talked a bit about decisions to visit and shop in the village as part of the retail question. Does anybody have anything specific that they want to add to that topic? Okay, now we go to what Jared was talking about earlier. How does our built environment affect decisions to buy or rent housing and live in the village? Thoughts?
Somebody else needs to talk. We're all talking too much.
I have
Can you
no
repeat
problem
that question?
talking. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Matt. I have no problem talking. Can you just say it again? And I guess
Okay, how does the built environment affect decisions to buy or rent housing and live in the village?
yeah, I mean, do you want our personal opinions on this, or
Yeah.
or just in general?
Because actually that sends us to the general.
Well, I think some of the questions we're posing tonight are all, they have some overlapping similarities. And I think that's why I haven't, then I've been a little quiet, because everyone, you know, seems to, you know, kind of be getting back to the same things here. And I think for a lot of people lately, it's once again, the walkable downtown, you know, the aspect of the small community, the availability of history. There is green space, you know, that idea. So you know, the affordability, being in a nice area. I mean, even with housing prices historically high right now, it's still much more affordable than, let's say, Saratoga. And it's not as rural as Burnt Hills. So you have like that in between area, and it seems, I grew up in Malta, so I'm not, you know, I love to drive to Malta for, you know, a quick Panera lunch sometimes. I prefer the village, but you know, if they're not open. But the reality is you can walk downtown. I mean, Ellen and I were talking the other day, and, you know, I said, if there's a snowstorm, the reality is as there is right now, you don't have to take your car out. You could walk down to Coffee Planet or to the Iron Roost or wherever, and grab a cup of coffee and grab lunch. And I think that that's really something that is unique. It's something that's not as common anymore. And so I think people are really sensing that, really desiring that sense of belonging. And I think the village does that for us. That's my take.
Other thoughts? Well, Josh, when you're talking about your wife saying, no, I really like going to Boston Spa. No, I'm sorry, Jared, I haven't heard anything from Josh. Jared, when you were saying that your wife really wanted to come to Boston Spa after she saw it, was there anything specifically?
Well, so following Monique here, again, I think we're going to hit the same points, really. What Boston Spa as a small village has is some of the convenience of living in a more densely populated area like a city, while also still being in a small area, right? Something that's relatively quiet, not a ton of traffic. Granted, there's a good amount that comes through on Milton Avenue, but again, compared to a city like Atlanta, I was previously in Minneapolis. Those are big cities where you have a lot of wonderful restaurants, great things to do. Atlanta's not really a good example because you can't walk in Atlanta anywhere unless you're downtown. But in Minneapolis, we could walk anywhere we wanted, get a bite to eat, go to the library, go see a show. And we can do a lot of that right here from the village as well. That draws people. That's what I think ultimately we're all kind of hitting on here. And Ellen,
The
earlier,
option to walk is what you're saying.
yes, exactly. The option to walk and to have different sorts of attractions that you can go and see and go and do, and different foods you can go and try. Ellen, you were mentioning at the Washington Street development, and what was going through my mind as you were talking about how that would kind of open the door up to the rest of Bass Street and Angelica. There's a momentum aspect to this that I'm not really sure how exactly to articulate it, but this ties into what Marilyn was talking about with social media as well, that there's something that's keeping this going here. And I think, to describe it succinctly, it's the built environment. It's the way the village is, that it's a small enough community that still allows for a broad enough interest. People from all walks of life could find something for themselves here.
Yeah, I think Marilyn said, maybe I'll botch this, but it's like success breeds more success. And the built environment, if it's well kept and it looks like it's perceived to be kept up, people are going to want to continue to and double down and invest. And if the built environment is run down or appears to be not up to snuff, people may overlook that, but it all goes hand in hand.
How up to stuff does Boston Spa really look?
Say that again, John?
How up to snuff does Boston Spa really look? When you look at
That's a relative question.
it is.
And
Everybody-
well, we know the big 800-pound gorilla in the room, and it's right north of us. Or we've got the modern building up on the other side of the Northway. So we're stuck between Malta and Saratoga. So
I'll take
I
it.
don't know if that's competition, but in people's minds, it's relative.
I'm going to take a different angle on this, like the up to snuff kind of idea. Like, I think when we look at going back to how well kept the village is, I think a lot of our historic buildings are, well kept. And obviously we've gone over where we have some challenges and, Ricketts and Angelica, but I live on the north end of Center Street. There is a house across the street from me that is now over a year old. There was a fire. I'm looking at it every
With a
day.
tarp.
Yeah, with the tarp. And, and there at this point, and I know there's not a whole lot we can do with it at this moment, but, there are things, standards, I think, in the village that would not really, like just general upkeep of property, garbage in lawns, unsided buildings. Don't come looking at my garage. It's winter. We've got house wrap on it. But, like long-term projects that just go unfinished and dilapidated, we could do better. We could even do, some kind of incentive or project, competition for villages, notoriety. We could look into all sorts of things, but we could do a little bit better in some of our areas. I think particularly in the north end of the village, we definitely could.
Josh,
And all I'll say is with the built environment that we have, especially the older homes, the homes that are, were lovingly built 100 years ago or more, it takes a special type of person to own a home like that, takes a special type of person with skills to help the homeowner rebuild in that case. I hope we're not being too judgmental here, but the thing we don't want to have happen is for people, developers, others, see those properties, whether they be private properties or potential retail, see them as, because they're old, in need of a tear down. Because there is adaptive reuse, there's sensitive building techniques that can be used, and all those things are possible in the village. It really is a village of opportunity. And again, you know, my last comment, it's a very affordable opportunity for a lot of young families compared to what we're surrounded by, the other communities to the north and south. So that's
Yeah.
it for me.
I couldn't agree more with you, and I hope I didn't come off as that. We have a home that's almost 100 years old as well, and it was something that, you know, we had bought out of foreclosure, and you know, my husband tirelessly works on it, so I can completely appreciate that, and I know what an asset it has been, and you know, an act of love to constantly keep up on an older home. But the case in particular, like, you know, I'm just talking about the case on my street, is it's a case of insurance and neglect by non-owner occupied homes, which I think is, you know, an issue. And I have a problem with trash being left in yards, you know, that kind of thing, and random cars.
Agreed. I
Yeah.
agree wholeheartedly with what you've said, because I've
Yeah.
had that same situation to deal with. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got 3 tenants, but I know that that's off topic, but I agree 100%. And it really comes down to just enforcing code. That's one of my big 3, but that's not even part of the strategic conversation, but I agree.
And what you're talking about is enforcing the maintenance codes.
Anything, use cars on the law, tarps, just this, yeah, there's
Even
code that doesn't
parking,
enforce.
even enforcing parking. And I just read the mayor's letter that came with this sewer bill about, you know, actually mentioning something about clearing, you know, sidewalks with snow. And I think that's wonderful. I just hope that's enforced,
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah, with a little more
I think people are
accountability,
melting.
and I think would help breed success, even more success.
Carrie, you want to say something, Carrie?
They have started ticketing people that don't shovel their sidewalks, specifically over by Malta Avenue School. Saw some tickets on some houses. So it does seem like they are enforcing that.
Okay, we should be closing up just about now. And we had yet to talk about threats to the village attractiveness. We spoke a little bit about that already in our last few minutes, I believe. We were talking about the tear downs, also the need to make sure that some of the basic property maintenance laws are maintained. Does anybody, does anybody want to comment on the very last part? Which talks about,
Only thing I'd say, John, is I think you hit the nail on the head with item number 3. I think scale is one of our greatest threats when it comes to the built environment. And I would also add to that conflict with the historic character of the village. And finally, the last thing, that loss or degradation of public green spaces, trees, buffers, the natural environment, and private property green spaces. I think that's the icing, you know, on the cake as far as Ballston Spa is concerned. It truly is a unique opportunity in the village to see so much green and how it enhances our built environment.
Okay, for those of you who don't have the list, the third item is that large overpowering projects where where control of mass scale and fenestration are not regulated, and there are 4 or more stories in CBD and 3 stories elsewhere. That's what number 3 was saying. Now, next thing on the agenda is responses to proposals for response to a request for proposals. I think you have all received the 2 that came in from VM Associates and also from Berger. I think they both are over budget, are they not, Liz?
I haven't had a chance to read through them. I just looked at the back page and I believe you're correct.
So I think the village trustees might want to look at it first before we do.
Well, I think, you know, you have to look at the scope of work and probably discuss with one or more that, you know, you did receive other proposals in the first go around, which I believe were more reasonably priced and actually included more work. Because I think those proposals included, you know, doing some zoning for the central business district, which this proposal dropped. So, you know, I think that's an issue you're going to have to deal with.
Okay, how does the committee want to handle this? Do we want to set up a separate meeting, or do we want to define and spend some time at the next meeting to discuss the 2 proposals?
I think we should talk about it first amongst ourselves before we, you know, so that if we do have a plan of attack or whatever, if we're gonna, oh, it sounds terrible. If we're going to talk to both of these entities, one of the things, and I just kind of looked through them kind of really quickly, something that I noticed both of them, one in particular did emphasize a lot was that, again, that public feedback thing. And I think when we did this discussion originally with the first round, we talked about the fact that we had just recently, as recent as 2020, done the economic development plan with Saratoga County Prosperity Partnership. We did a whole bunch of outreach to the community and surveys and all this stuff. I kind of feel like I don't want to go over and reinvent the wheel and do that over again. I don't know if anybody else feels like that's necessary, and that's part and parcel of both of these plans. It do include something like that. By not doing it, I'm not sure it really makes a big difference to the bottom line, because I don't think those are the more expensive kind of like pieces to it. But that might be something that we want to talk about with them, about whether we really need to do that again.
Okay, when do we want to talk about it, though?
We have to do it fairly soon. According to the schedule that we set up, we have to have our review completed by Thursday, February 10th.
Well, I guess that is pretty quick, isn't it? Is that before we have the interview with the people?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. The interviews are the 15th through the 22nd.
of February. I think if we've already had 2 proposals, if we ask them to come in for an interview, the only question is going to be the money. Because there's no sense just having one person come in for an interview. You have to have them both. Well. Is anybody, a few people willing to volunteer to be a subcommittee to look at these things rather closely, maybe on Saturday or Sunday? We all have plans for the weekend, huh?
I work weekends.
Yeah.
But
How about Monday evening?
I could do Monday evening.
Okay.
Yeah, Monday's good.
Can't do Monday, but it's okay.
Okay, so Monday, Terry? And I didn't hear, I couldn't see who, there were two other people. Was it Marilyn and Matt? I couldn't tell.
Yes.
If we need some more heads, I could probably make Monday work as well.
Okay.
So this would be Monique, Marilyn, and I. Do we want to plan to get together? Where do we want to plan to get together, I guess?
Is you want to be involved also, Carrie? Carrie? Did you want to be involved as well?
I can't make Monday.
You
But thank
can't.
you.
I
No.
thought you came in and said.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah, if Monique, Marilyn, and Jared,
Mhm.
if we could get together sometime before Monday evening, or Monday evening or before, anytime, then get back to the rest of the committee as to what you have come up with as far as where there might be able to be some negotiating points with the various, with the two firms, and what you think about the get our juices running as to what you think about the quality of the proposals.
Okay. To go back, Jared asked, are we going to meet at the where you are currently, or do we want to meet virtually? And what time?
I suppose since it's just three of us, we could just do virtually.
I'm totally fine with that. Everyone else, Marilyn and,
Yeah, that's fine.
okay, perfect. What time works for everyone?
7 or after is good for me. So as long as that works for the both of you, I'd say we could even just do 7. That's fine.
Yeah, 7 is fine.
I can make that work too. That's great.
Okay, great. Let us know what you come up with. In the meantime, between now and then, all of us should be studying the comprehensive plan. So when Monique, Marilyn, and Jared come up with a report, we'll know what they're talking about. Okay, it's 8:15. We're about 15 minutes over where we should be. Anything further? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Marilyn, and I'll send out like an email. I'll send a Zoom link. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
No. I understand. And this.